Hi, and welcome to North and Chick, a podcast about food, community, and well-being.
I'm Hayley North. I work as a holistic chef, food educator, yoga and movement teacher.
And I'm Kirsten Chick, nutritional therapist, writer, and author.
Together, we're passionate about nourishing our community with food, nutrition, movement, and in many other ways.
In our work and personal lives, we meet so many inspiring people doing incredible work for their community. So we have a wonderful lineup of guests for you. We'll be sharing our conversations alongside recipes, nutrition tips, and general life tips.
We'd love your feedback, so please get in touch via our social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as North and Chick. You can follow us there and also subscribe to our podcast to get an alert each time we release a new episode. Hi, and welcome to episode 4 in the North and Chick podcast. We've been thinking lots around some of the poignant and necessary questions of our time, particularly around inclusivity, equality, hierarchy, and the systems and structures that no longer reflect the core values of humanity that most of us wish to live by. The guests we include in this podcast are all in some way actively engaged in communities local and global, working with empowerment of the individual voice and more integrated and connected ways of living. Our guests so far have been so inspiring, and we're excited to be talking to Darren Abrahams about his work later. We feel excited about opening up a space for these conversations to be had and to hold a platform that showcases the important work that is being done on the ground at grassroots level. So Kirsten, how do you see nutrition fitting into this? How does understanding nutrition help people feel more empowered and have more authority over their own lives?
That's a really nice question, because that's really what motivates me to do this job in the first place. A lot of people feel at the mercy of random genetics events and infections that they can do nothing about. And especially if somebody has been diagnosed with an illness or a condition and they feel like they've been taking care of themselves, they've been eating, reasonably well, they've been fairly active all of their lives. There's a lot of different things that we need to consider. So it's not just genetics, but it's environmental factors. It's the impact of stress on our bodies. And often their symptoms, all of the things that they're experiencing are connected. So if somebody has a number of health issues and they feel like they're completely falling apart, actually, I can show them how they might be connected and how there might be a common theme. Perhaps it's inflammation, perhaps it's a deficiency of a certain nutrient or nutrient group. And then they can do something about it and take control of themselves. And this is the wonderful thing about nutrition. We eat every day, most of us. So that gives us opportunities every day to nourish ourselves, to support ourselves, to change what we're doing if it needs changing. So it's a process that we can own and feel empowered by it. In terms of accessibility, there are various levels to which people can access nutrition, and a lot of that is political. So in terms of accessing good, healthy, nutritious food, there's a price tag on that. And a lot of the price tag on that isn't actually to do with how expensive it is to produce that food, but how expensive it is to get the organic label on that food, the processes that companies have to go through, for example. There's also the price tag on coming to see me as a nutritional therapist. So not everybody can afford to do that. So we do have conversations around where people can access cheaper, good quality food, for example, growing their own food, joining community allotment, sharing garden spaces. That's one option that people could look into. Buying organic seasonal food is often a similar price to the non-organic seasonal food. So it's really looking out for buying ingredients where you can make things yourselves that are just as cheap or cheaper than the products that you're buying in the shops, and realizing that those really really cheap processed foods aren't the only way to eat cheaply. I should imagine you work a lot with that in your role as a food educator as well, Hayley.
Yeah, just as you were talking then, I was remembering only a few days ago, I was with a friend who buys a lot of things ready-made, which cost a lot of money, things like jars of peanut butter or pots of hummus, but they can be so easily made ourselves. I love to see the look on someone's face, particularly when you show them how to make something like hummus or nut butter, because it's just peanuts, right? Or it's just cashews, or it's just almonds. And okay, you need a blender in some way to be able to blend them, but like, that's it. And the wonder on people's faces, like, what? Is that it? You mean I don't have to add any oil or any water or any salt or anything? No, that's it. And it's just like, wow, that's magic. And instantly you see something's been transformed in their understanding of what this product is. And you see the dots connecting through somebody's eyes. You can almost see it happening in their mind of like, hang on a minute, why am I not making this for myself? This is just easy. And so we're led to believe that some of these things are impossible for us to make, that this is how they come. They come ready produced from the factory in the jar. And, these are things that you buy. But actually, and like hummus, it's just one of the most simplest things. And when people make it themselves, again, you see that transformation, the look on the face like, oh my God, I really didn't understand that was so easy.
It's that understanding, isn't it? That education, but also the confidence as well to be able to go out there and do it.
Yeah.
So a lot of people I speak to say, well, I've tried making hummus, or I've tried making soups, but they never taste as good.
Yeah.
But when you encourage them to taste as they go along, to play with different flavors, to make it their own, and they're really engaged and involved in that process, then they make something that they find so much more delicious than what's in the shops in the end. And then that's also empowering and inspires confidence for those people to go out and support themselves and nourish themselves.
Yeah, and something as simple as that can make you feel really strong and powerful. It's like, I'm capable, I'm resilient. It makes me feel very powerful.
And then that leads naturally into the process of listening to what your body needs right now.
Yeah.
And that's the other really important empowering role of nutrition. I often say my job isn't to tell people what to eat. My job is to help people get to the place where they don't need a nutritionist or a nutrition book or anything like that. They're just listening to their body. And that's a huge element. In order to be able to do that, you need to trust your body and have confidence in your body. We've become disconnected.
Yeah.
We feel like our bodies have let us down in some way, often either because of illness or because of body image or all sorts of reasons that we lose trust in our bodies. But re-establishing that connection is really key, and there are really lovely ways to do that. And that's what I really appreciate and love about the work that you do, Hayley, on your retreats, in the kitchen, in the studio, with yoga, with qigong, with other forms of movement. It all interweaves into the same process of connecting with ourselves, connecting with your body.
Absolutely. And this disconnect that you are talking about between like body and mind, between the rational thinking, intellectual brain and the somatic, the kinesthetic, the felt aspect, and the set of like inhabiting the body, living in the body, and that the body has a voice and that the body is telling us all the time what it needs. And when we just buy stuff and consume stuff out of habit or pattern, or just that's what we've always done, or it's there on the shelf, or it's what I fancy at the moment because some part of us is desiring that or craving that or whatever, we're constantly overriding and not giving the space for that body voice, for those messages to be heard. I understand that not everyone can make everything for themselves. Life's busy, people have got responsibilities and commitments and etc. But the more we do, doesn't mean say we have to do it all, but the more we do for ourselves and increase the connection to the food, to the ingredients, as opposed to being separated from it by a whole chain of processes, our connection with it deepens so much that it helps the body-mind relationship as well. Because it's like all these dots start suddenly joining up and it just all starts to happen quite naturally, I find.
And it makes life easier and more fulfilling and more nourishing in so many different ways, which is ironic because I think a lot of the reason that people just go to the shop, buy what's there, trust that it has good ingredients for some reason, is because we don't have the headspace to do anything but that, because life is so busy, because there are so many responsibilities, there's so many different things we have to think about and do and boxes to tick, that's one thing we want to hand over. We want to hand over responsibility for that. Yeah. So we just go to the shop and buy whatever's there. But actually, when we start to take that responsibility back again, rather than that adding to the load on our shoulders, actually it can be really freeing, because it puts us in the center again, and it gives us that self-empowerment to be more in control of what's going on.
Absolutely. I love that it puts us back at the centre, and that's a really empowering thing.
And we have to invest time and effort in changing habits and making new habits. And again, that's another benefit in having that step-by-step approach.
Yeah, we should be taught this stuff from a young age, because you're like a superhero when you know this stuff.
We've been interviewing some amazing superheroes, and we've got another lovely superhero coming up. Or let's introduce Darren.
Darren Abrahams is a singer, coach, trauma therapist and trainer, working internationally as a facilitator and project leader in the fields of personal, cultural and community development. Darren's co-founder of the Human Hive, a CIC working with individuals and organisations to make a more welcoming and inclusive world. He's on the steering team and head of pastoral care for the Complete Freedom of Truth, an international youth-led project developing global youth citizenship through culture and the arts, and is a trainer and wellbeing advisor for Musicians Without Borders, where he trains musicians to use music for peace building. As a singer, Darren performed internationally for companies such as the Young Vic, English National Opera, the Royal Opera, Teatro Comunale di Bologna, I think I've got that right, and Wexford Opera. This year he is singing the title role in Nigel Osborne's opera Naciketa at the London South Bank, and co-creating new opera Beam with soprano and empowerment coach Nadine Benjamin. Darren is an expert at making people feel safe while bringing communities together to heal.
Hi, Darren, and welcome to our podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We know that you're extremely busy, and we really appreciate you making the time.
Hi, Hayley. Hi, Kirsten. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to talk to you and to your audience. I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you. So you mentioned to us that during the first lockdown back in March 2020, rather than everything stopping for you, it was actually more like the accelerator button had been pressed, and you've literally been a busy bee. So let's start with the Human Hive. What can you tell us about that project?
Sure. So the Human Hive is a community interest company that I run with myself and my business partner, Kate McAllister. And we began our journey together in 2015, primarily because we were interested in supporting people going through the refugee experience. So we were sitting in our homes in Brighton, looking across the channel at the very large jungle refugee camp, as it was called, kind of growing on the shores of northern France. And we felt that we wanted to offer something to support those people going through the experience they were going through. And Kate's a teacher. As you've described, I work in community development and in trauma therapy. So when we met, we pulled our ideas together, and that's how the Human Hive journey began. We've developed a long way since then. So now what we're doing really is about supporting individuals and organizations to create a more welcoming and inclusive world. So that can take many, many different forms, but we're mostly supporting people to become a safe space for other people who might have been through challenges in their life to come in and feel included, and then to build projects together. Our strapline or our major philosophy is with, not for. So we try to do everything in collaboration with the people we're working with, rather than coming in with a pre-decided outcome or a pre-decided offer and then imposing that on those people. So we're always looking at an empowerment model. that's part of why we're called the Human Hive. It's about everybody has a skill, everybody has something to contribute, and somewhere in the big network of our hive, there will be someone who will have the skill or the expertise or the connections that you're looking for. We work in education, we work in community building, kind of within organizations, and we also work within the activism space, supporting people who are working like right on the front line with people going through trauma. So that's kind of a snapshot, really, of the Human Hive.
So how are you doing education differently at the Hive School, and why?
Well, education is very close to both of our hearts. So at the beginning of last year, before COVID was a thing and before we went into lockdown, Kate went out to the Dominican Republic to investigate a new kind of global movement in education called world schooling, which is where people who are digital nomads travel around the globe and put their kids into progressive education. And we were interested in this for our model for the Human Hive, because we had created our own methodology, education methodology, that comes out of both of our work in secondary schools in the UK, but also very much around our experience of working within refugee camps. And we were looking at creating a more long-term sustainable model and taking it right into the education system. So how do you prevent people from getting into exclusion or burnout or the other issues that come up through the challenges that we have in life? And you do that by embedding that really early and building it in through the education system. So we believe that education isn't necessarily about knowledge, it's about learning how to be a human being. It's about learning how to regulate yourself, regulate your feelings, your body, your emotions, regulate your relationships, become self-directed, learn how to learn so that you can use those skills in any new environment you put yourself into all through your life, not just in the 13 years or so of formal education. And that's the emphasis. It's about supporting young people to develop ideas and projects for themselves and learn about the world that way. So what we have is an environment where 4 to 16-year-olds are all working together and, at different stages in different groups, but they're able to interact and cross-pollinate. And we work through finding solutions to the Sustainable Development Goals. So we're looking at global problems and supporting young people to make a difference and contribute to the solving of those global problems at that local level. So we're in our third 6-week project now of our first year. We've Goal 14, which is life under the water, Goal 13, which is life on land. At the moment, I can't remember which number this goal is, but they're looking at sustainable energy. And next project, they're doing healthy living and well-being.
So what kind of students do you have at the Human Hive? You talked a little bit about the children of these international digital nomads, but also I'm well aware that you also work with local native kids as well, that it's a real cross-pollination within these schools.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a mixed model. As I said, it's inclusive. At the moment, we have, I think there are about 30 to 40 young people at the school. 6 at the moment are local Dominicans. The rest are either internationals that are based in the area or they're coming in as world schoolers. And as we develop the model, then that ratio will shift. But we're also looking at the Hive School becoming a teacher training space. So we want to be able to support local teachers and international teachers to learn the Hive methodology and then take that away, either back into their own educational environments or eventually we hope to open their own Hive School. So we end up with a global network. And then each one of those Hive schools will respond to the context that it's in. We always want it to be available for people who don't have the money to pay the kinds of fees that internationals are able to pay. So in a way, like a lot of the things that we do with Human Hive, I look at it as a kind of Robin Hood model, is that those who can afford it will pay, and those who are not able to afford it financially will reap the benefits of that. But it means that everybody can participate in equality within the space and learn together, share skills together, develop together. Big issue that I see with young people who might come from more challenging backgrounds is they don't get to develop the kinds of networks that middle and upper middle class kids develop. And it's the networks of relationships that really help people move forward. Your dad knows someone who runs a business who will give you an internship, or your mum works in this business, will give you work experience, or, all of those kinds of things that happens naturally. Kids who come from more socioeconomically challenged backgrounds don't get to tap into those kinds of networks. So we want the Human Hive to become that network for those kids so that they're not stuck within the environments that they're born into. And that's a big part of mobility, I think.
So Kate, who you've mentioned, who is currently in Dominican Republic with the first Hive school that you've launched there, you've worked with on the school bus project in Calais, which evolved into the crisis classroom. How much of that work that you've done together has evolved into the Human Hive?
Well, it's all there. I think one of our major values is evolution. We allow ourselves to evolve, constantly evolve, and we are looking always at need. What is the need right now in this place? And can we develop a solution to that need or an offering towards that need? And so when we first met, we met because Kate had the idea of converting a double-decker bus into a school and taking it to a refugee camp. And I was interested in that idea. So I gave her some money through Indiegogo and we met up for coffee. And that was the beginning of our relationship. But all the way through, we were looking at how responsive can we be to the actual needs of the people on the ground that we are aiming to support. So before we did anything, before we put a crowdfunder together or bought a bus or did anything, we went to Calais for a recce and we went and we talked to people who lived in the camp and said, hey, we've got this idea. Does that work here? Would you be interested if we brought a double-decker bus? And it's only because we got great feedback from the people that were there that we carried on with the project. But we listened to them very carefully and they said, yeah, a bus would be really nice because we don't have that many places to learn in. But what we really need is teachers. So the first thing we did was send Kate to Calais for 6 months to teach and develop the educational model. And so that's how that began. And within a month, we realized that one Kate wasn't going to be enough. So that's when we started to develop our training model. And we trained 60 other people that year to come in and deliver education-based activities to lots of different people in camp. And all those people who we trained came from different educational backgrounds, had different skill sets. So they did their own thing, but we looked after them and trained them through the methodology. And when the camp closed at the end of 2016, we recognized that we had now a training model and a framework that could be used in other places. But at that point, we realized that it wasn't going to be about buses. So we were happy to leave the bus behind, and that continued to work in northern France. And we then got a pink inflatable pop-up classroom and started to take that around Europe to different locations and to work with the inflatable classroom. All the same ideas, just developed for different contexts. And then, as things have developed, we've needed the pop-up classroom less and less, and now we have an actual building. But that doesn't mean that all those other things that we've done before are going to be left behind. It's a model. It's not specifically based on a pop-up classroom or a building or a bus. The model itself can exist in any environment that people are in. So if a bus is the most appropriate response, then it can be a bus. Or if a tent is an appropriate response, it can be a tent. The important thing is the people. Always about the people, always about the relationships that you build, and always about creating space for others to develop their own expertise. We are building projects that can stand on their own and develop on their own. If we have to stay part of it for the long term in order for it to keep going, I think we look at that as potentially a failure, because the idea is that the people themselves will take that project forward. We'll be there to lend support, provide the network, hold hands until the time necessary to let go. And so those are the principles and values that we've had from the very beginning, and we just take them with us, even if the name changes. We were School Bus Project, and then we were Crisis Classroom because we were primarily working within the refugee context. Now, even though we still work within the refugee context, we're also working inside businesses, we're working inside schools. We have our own school, which is nothing to do with refugee crisis. So it felt as though the name Crisis Classroom was holding us back at that point. So we've evolved into the Human Hive, and hey, who knows, that name might change at some point as well.
So Darren, you're obviously a great instigator of projects, and you've talked a little bit there about what happens when you hand them over. They don't end, they very much continue, and that's part of the point, is that the people that you're working with, the communities, then take these over for themselves. But how do you know when to let go? You obviously must be very good at letting go too.
Yes, I think letting go has become a personal practice, like maybe even like a spiritual practice, the ability to let go of things. But it's not a linear process. What I recognize through all of my work, whether it's in private practice as a therapist or coach, or whether it's doing larger community projects, is that people need you to hold their hand for a while. while they're learning how to walk on their own. So it doesn't mean that you're doing stuff for them all the time. It just means that you're there. Sometimes just the safety that you give by being available, by being, on the end of a phone call or at the end of an email to answer a question or to come in and offer some support is enough to keep people moving forward in their own journey. And there's a point where they might not contact you anymore for that. And that's the kind of way that you know that maybe the relationship has shifted around. But it's not a finite thing, because often when people go through expansion, they'll need to come back. They'll need something else. They'll need the next piece of the puzzle, or they'll want to get involved at a different level. So my goal always is to help people to be independent and run their own projects, but never just to kind of drop people. It's always like, we're here. We're available whenever you need support, but only when you need support. We're not going to push you. We're not going to poke at you. We might check in to see how you're doing. Letting go, it's a felt thing, and it's very much about how the relationship is developing, and it happens over time.
Yeah, I'm trying to tie that in with, the outward focus of the communities that you're working with, the environments that you're working in, whether it's corporate or performance or schools, education, whatever it is. I know you also care deeply, and it's just as important to you to focus on the well-being of those who are serving. So the staff, the teachers, the ground workers. I've heard you say, who's caring for the carers?
Yes, I would say that's my main focus, actually, for a number of different reasons. One very, very practical reason is that without those people, then development work doesn't happen. I see people who are right there on the front line of community work, whether it's teaching or whether it's nursing, or if you're a police officer or fire officer, or anybody who's working on that front line with people is going to be coming into presence with trauma and dysregulation, on a biological, psychological, social level. And if you're not able to recognize that for yourself, you're not able to manage that and regulate that for yourself, then you end up getting secondary trauma. And once people go into that cycle of having secondary trauma in the nervous system, then that's the route to burnout and breakdown. And what I witness around me is that those people who are the carers, the ones that are not cared for, are holding back the tide for the rest of society from that tsunami of trauma that's out there. And without proper support, then we've seen this through COVID in the last year, is that actually people don't have the resources to take care of themselves. I'm really passionate about ensuring that those people who are doing the caring work get the care that they need themselves, get the understanding that they need themselves, are understanding that they need to put themselves first sometimes in order to do the work that we're there to do. So that's a very practical level. Without those people, then actually communities tend to fall over. But the other level is on the human level, is that, if we're not taking care of each other, then people fall down and collapse. And then you end up having to be on the receiving end of support yourself, which may not be there. Most of it is not actually there. There's no infrastructure in place to support people who are doing caring work. That's another level. And then there's the level of expansion and empire building in the kind of the broadest possible term, is that if you want to make change on the planet, you have to empower people to make that change. So the change that I'm interested in is that, self-regulation, co-regulation, developing projects to change your environment, becoming self-empowered. So that can't happen on a top-down hierarchical approach. It can't be about me and Kate dictating that all over the world. It's got to be about supporting all these grassroots activists, all these practitioners everywhere to do that work in their own way, empowered to help it to fit their own context, and also to spread the word themselves. So that's the only way I think we're going to get global change, is that if we work from the human outwards. And the most effective humans to work with are those who are interested in making change already, those who are at the front lines, doing caring work, building communities, taking care of kids, doing all that stuff now. I guess it's a kind of 3 reasons why I think that's important.
Yeah, and currently you're working on a project, aren't you, embedding well-being into grassroots humanitarian aid projects. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. So last year, you mentioned before that I was really busy all through the COVID lockdown. And a big reason for that was that I was asked to come in and do some psychosocial support work for volunteers and staff members working in grassroots organisations supporting refugees in refugee camps across Europe. And I was doing one-on-one work, and a bit of group supervision work. And I'd known this for a very long time. It's been a big focus of mine to, that there isn't much care and well-being embedded into these grassroots organizations. It's not a well-regulated sector because it's completely grown from nothing to meet a need. And I've been trying to get this kind of well-being approach into those organizations for a while, but because they're so busy on the ground and dealing with crisis as it's happening, there's just been no space for it. And last year was the first time that there was space because it was enforced space. All the borders of the camps closed, projects couldn't get in, they had to stop, everybody was in isolation. So it was a time when we could start looking at the fallout of the work that they've been doing, what was the personal need for those individuals, but then starting to look at that from the organizational level. And I was very lucky to be working with a couple of other organizations, and we created a coalition to address this issue. And we've been building this project for the last year, and we're funded by Choose Love, which is a UK-based organization that's been supporting people going through the refugee experience for the last 7 years. My partners are Refugee Trauma Initiative, another grassroots organisation working specifically around trauma training, and Indigo Volunteers. It's a volunteer kind of filtering organisation. And ourselves, Human Hive, we've built this coalition, and we're working with 12 grassroots organisations from northern France all the way through to Lebanon, embedding well-being into their policies and training up one member of each team to act as the wellbeing coordinator for the organisation. So holding that piece for the organisation. We've just started. We're 3 weeks into our foundation training. As I said, I think it's a 6-month project. We're having it properly evaluated so we can see whether it's useful. We're learning from it. Again, it's with, not for. We're developing it with the people that we're working with. We're getting lots of feedback. And we'll be able to tell at the end whether this approach does make a difference. First of all, on the organizational level, and then hopefully if we get a second pilot, a second round, we'll turn that out onto the communities that are being supported. And then I think that's your two sides of the coin. It's like you've got a stabilized, self-regulating organization, which then knows how to do the same work for the communities they serve.
And you're also Wellbeing Advisor for Musicians Without Borders.
Yes, I am. So I kind of practiced some of these skills and some of these ideas within that organisation. MWB is how old are we now? 22-year-old organisation training musicians in post-conflict zones to use music as a tool for community building and peace building. And I've known Laura Hassler, the director and founder, for a number of years through other work. And in 2015-16, as the so-called refugee crisis started to impact on Europe, we got in touch again, and she invited me to come to a conference to talk about the work we were doing at Calais. And through that, I just got more and more involved with Musicians Without Borders work. I became a trainer for the team. I developed a whole model on music and the nervous system and how our music building work, like giving evidence for how and why music making shifts people and supports people through conflict resolution. On the biological level, like shifting the body, on the psychological level about mood, and on the social level about changing of identities. So those are things that I've been developing with Musicians Without Borders specifically, and training people all over the world to use those skills. And then we were looking more and more about the well-being of the team itself. So my role is to take care of the team, when they're out on the field, to make sure that there's a well-being check-in and a check-out, look after the mental health while they're away, look after, like all through COVID, we were having regular check-ins for the whole team and just giving a space for people to talk about their feelings, developing the well-being policies for MWB. So all the stuff that we're now bringing into this well-being pilot, I've been practicing within MWB for the last couple of years or so. And it's an organization that I'm really passionate about, that it's an incredible team, international team of musicians who are working sometimes in very challenging environments and just doing amazing work using the arts as a tool for transformation. I'm really passionate about that. I think, as you know, that's music is part of my professional skill set as well. So it's a place where I can marry a lot of my interests.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a powerful tool.
So this brings us to quite neatly to your musical background, Darren. So you actually started... Beautifully set up. Thank you for that. you started out as an opera singer, and this year brings you back to opera. Mm-hmm. And before we talk about that, why did you leave in the first place?
Such a great question. Well, I didn't actually leave. I haven't left the arts. I didn't leave singing. What I did do was sidestep my way out of the industry. And there were a number of reasons for that. I mean, partly it happened very, very early in my career. I mean, I trained, it was like a very long training. I did 3 years at university, and then I did 3 years at the Royal Academy of Music, and then I did another year at the National Opera Studio. So it's kind of about 7 years of training with 2 years in between, like out working. So I finally kind of graduated from all my training in the year 2000, and then went out into the industry. And a year later, it was my 30th birthday, and I was working for Mid Wales Opera doing Così fan tutte, a Mozart opera. And I was standing on a hill in the middle of Wales, and so I was thinking, is this it? Is this what this career is? Am I just going to be touring around singing opera for mostly wealthy people? And even though I loved the performing arts and I loved being on stage, it just wasn't enough. And I'd always had an interest in education work and development work. I was very interested in international politics, and I actually found that as an opera singer, in the way that the industry is set up, there was no space for me to share the values that I had through my work, because it's a hierarchical industry, it's a hierarchical structure. It's about translating the vision of a director or a conductor, usually through the eyes of a dead composer, and you can become a bit of a puppet within that environment. You have to go where you're told to go and say what you're told to say, and within the context of the opera, but that actually does spill out into the rest of your life. And I also recognize that the industry itself was pretty toxic. There are many aspects of that industry that I actually think are abusive towards the people in it, not just the singers, but everybody. So there's a whole load of things about it, and I just found more and more that I didn't really fit.
So you're doing things very differently with Beam coming up. So Beam is an opera about trauma and healing, but you're also doing how you do opera differently there. Tell us more about that.
Yes, thanks. So really exciting. So yeah, I'm kind of stepping back into the opera world this year, but in this very different way. And my very dear friend, Nadine Benjamin, who is an incredible operatic soprano, and also an empowerment coach, NLP master, just extraordinary human being. We've been working for a few years talking about, the whole issues within the industry and how you empower people more within space. And Nadine is a woman of color, and specifically talking about it from that perspective, the perspective of exclusion within institutions and within the industry. And in 2019, we started to create this opera Beam based on her life story, because so many of the issues that Nadine has faced on her journey of development as a human being are universal themes that we felt were really important to be talking about. Yes, for the industry, the classical music industry, but also broader than that, for the community in general. We put together a 25-minute starter version of Beam for the Tete-a-Tete Opera Festival, and we got great feedback, and we learned a lot from that process. And this year, we've been very, very privileged to be supported by the Britain Peers Arts Foundation in Snape Malting's Aldborough to put on the full production of Beam and develop the entire work. So we're working towards that at the moment. We're going to be premiering at Snape Malting's on the 26th and 27th of June. And we've been building the piece for the last few months, ready to go into rehearsal. But as you said, alongside that, Nadine and I were very, very passionate about doing that in a different way and creating an open, inclusive, non-hierarchical company and working methodology so that we could do opera differently. And with the support of our funders at Britain Peers Arts, with a lot of support, actually, a lot of interest from the wider industry, I think, again, a bit like what's happened in grassroots activism, classical music has also recognised through COVID that things have to shift and change. This is a moment where we're able to talk about the things that we're passionate about with the receptive ears. And I think that's what Beam is going to be able to do this year, is first of all, to be able to show this amazing story and do it in a way that is innovative and different and multimedia, showcase the incredible talent that is Nadine and the rest of our company, but also alongside that to write a book or a handbook to be able to present to other companies about how you do this. How did we build this? How do we create this non-hierarchical structure? How did we include people from different cultures and backgrounds in the space and involve them in the creation of the piece? It'll be 2 performances this year, but our plan is to do a national tour next year and to do alongside that a whole load of community outreach work, which we're calling InReach. We don't want it to be about them and us. We want it to be about how do we invite people into our space and create conversations around the themes of the opera. So that will be the next piece of development that we do. So look out for us in a community near you in 2022.
Great. So we'll put up some links to Beam. And this is what's wonderful about a lot of the projects that you do, is you're not just exploring something and then creating a project. You're then sharing what you learn, sharing what you come up with. You're looking for that to have an impact, not just on the rest of the opera world, but on the rest of the world. So later this year, you're going to be singing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling about that?
Well, when I do think about it, a little bit nervous. It's a bit further down the line, so I've got some time to prepare. Obviously, there's a few other things happening in the meantime. But I'm super excited because I'm ready to be an artist again. It's been a long journey, like stepping outside and being much more in the other space, in the training space, in the production space. And again, as I said about showing up as the whole you, I am a performing artist. I have been since I was about 3 years old. So like singing has always kind of poured out of me. I'm ready to come back to it from a different place. I think maybe from a healed place. I recognize that there was a lot of pain that came up in my relationship with my music making as a consequence of being within the industry. And I don't blame the industry for that at all. The industry is the industry. There's no one to blame for that. Just recognizing that maybe my expectations were different. And when you come into contact with something, when your expectations are shown to be false or not quite the reality, I think that there was a lot of resentment that maybe came up in me and some betrayal. Again, that's no one else's fault, but I needed to step away from it for a while to be able to heal that in myself. And that's been my own journey. And now I do feel that I have reconciled myself with that. I'm in a very different space for it, and I'm ready to stand on that stage and to channel the music again. So, I wouldn't do it for just any old production. Naciketa is a really important piece of work. It's an opera that was actually written with my voice in mind about 10 years ago. We never had the opportunity to perform it fully because of funding issues and all sorts of things and right timing. And I think this year, again, is right timing. And it's an amazing company. Opera Circus is the producer of this work. Opera Circus is a company that I've worked with for many years with a lot of my international development work. The Complete Freedom of Truth is a project that's come out of Opera Circus. Tina Ellen Lee, who is the artistic director, actually a mentor of mine, has this approach to collaborative creativity has come very much from her model. So I'm very, very excited to be doing this again. I was a bit resistant because the role that I'm playing as a child, and I turn 50 in a couple of months. So I was a bit of me that was like, oh, should I be singing this role? And maybe I should be playing one of the other roles who's, an adult role. And, I kind of taught myself around that. It's like, it's opera, it's fine. It's a concert performance. And I do feel like I've got something to say in this role. Yeah. So, it's not 100% yet. We're still waiting for the final pieces of funding to fall and, COVID regulations and things like that. But, I would say it's like 95% certain that I will be standing on that stage on the South Bank and singing this role in October.
Wow, I can't wait. Yeah, good luck. I really hope you say it's 95%. I'm going to trust that it's going to happen. I'm going to be there.
Yeah, give us your energy.
Absolutely. I can't wait. So you mentioned, there are other projects we're not going to have time to go into today. There are so many projects that you're involved with, which is quite extraordinary. But at the root of everything that you do is the empowerment of the individual, whether through your therapy practice, your coaching work, whether in corporate environments or educational settings, directly in the community, through the arts. It's just incredible. What's the driving force that inspires you through all of this? Why is this kind of work and this approach so important to you?
So I think that's a complex question with maybe a complex answer. I think there are many different layers and reasons why it's important to me that have evolved through my life and my life experience. At its very root, I can track it back to my heritage, which is the heritage of being a British Jewish person. My mother is Israeli. So growing up with the backdrop of the Arab-Israeli conflict, which is, very sadly and very, very upsettingly kind of flaring up as the backdrop to this conversation. Right now, as we speak, there are bombs dropping on Gaza and rockets dropping on Israel. And I have always felt very strongly about wanting to contribute positively towards some kind of resolution to that conflict. Recognizing that this is a very complex, long-term, systemic problem, which there's no way that I could solve on my own, but it has been a driver. And I think that's why being a performing artist and being an opera singer wasn't enough at that time, is because I thought, well, actually, as a singer, what am I doing to contribute to the resolution of conflict across the world? Whether it's in that very specific context or whether it's in all the other contexts that I began to learn about around the planet. And that has led me more and more into looking at, well, what is the root? What is the very root of that? I can see it happening. The evidence of that you see is when you get these flare-ups of violence that take place. But the violence are just the spikes, the flowering of something, if that's the right term. I mean, that's a very poetic way to talk about violence, but of something that is much more built into the roots of a conflict, of an antagonism between communities. And where does that originally come from? And the more I looked, the more I saw that from the individual out, is that actually conflict is fueled by individual dysregulation. And as individuals are dysregulated, that has a knock-on effect on the individuals around that person. So if somebody is affected by the trauma of their life, that will affect their relationships. And that cluster and that constellation will then affect the community. And then that community will then affect the town or the region or the society, and it grows out from there. And I think actually this current conflict that we're looking at in the news at the moment is like, you can see the origins of that. We've had a year of lockdown and people being trapped at home, very, very much having to suppress their emotions, suppressing their frustration, suppressing their anger because of the global pandemic. And then as things start to open up, that energy has to go somewhere. And what I recognize is that unscrupulous politicians from all sides of the conflict know how to exploit that. They know how to exploit the dysregulation of individuals and communities. So it doesn't take much to push people into physical conflict, because when you feel unsafe, you start to move out of contact with yourself and you go into your primary defense mechanisms, into your fight, flight, freeze or faint responses. So the wrong word or the wrong action or the wrong moment can trigger something much bigger. And then dysregulation is contagious. Like once it kicks off somewhere, then it starts to send its ripples out. Something that we talk about through our training, we call it the magical invisible cord. The magical invisible cord is that invisible nervous system connection from person to person. And once that starts to shake, once it begins to vibrate at a certain level, you're going to just get feedback from everybody else around you. And then, of course, then it just spreads like wildfire. So what we're seeing right now in Israel-Palestine is someone has yanked that cord. Someone or someones. I'm not going to mention any names, but you can probably guess who I'm talking about, like within the leaderships of both of those places. And so therefore this conflict has been set off. People who suffer are generally the ones who are at the front line of that. And they're the families and the civilians that get caught in the crossfire. So who really benefits from that? The only people who benefit from that are the people who want to keep the status quo, the people who like the power structure as it is. Because as long as you keep people afraid, as long as you keep people in their paradigms and stuck in their habits, you're going to be able to control them. So coming back to the question about why this work is important to me is that the empowerment of the individual, the ability to come into contact with your own body and your own feelings and your own habits and manage your own relationships and your own work and be able to regulate yourself gives you as an individual power. It gives you the power to make choices. It gives you the power to see the world in different ways, not just the way that you've been told to see the world. And it gives you the power to change your behavior. It's a slower process, but if you work with the individual, then just like the dysregulated magical invisible cord sending out ripples of dysregulation and trauma and violence, you can create beacons of stability within a community that send out the opposite. If you're regulated and you can stand strong in your own power, then you're going to send that safety energy out, and that will start to dampen the causes, it will dampen the behaviors. So that's why I think the individual level is really important. Of course, you've got to work from both levels, work from the individual and the grassroots up, and if possible, work from the institutions down. But it's much harder to get to those institutions because they're entrenched within the power system. If you can get to the individuals, and maybe the individuals within those organizations, then you can start to infect with a different kind of virus. And I think that is what, building on the work of great non-violence practitioners of the 20th century and before, Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, people who started huge movements of non-violence. I think that's the root of it, the ability to manage the self first, so that you can stand strong and be courageous, because it takes a huge act of courage not to join in with the energy of those people around you. That's why that's important to me. I hope that answers the question.
Oh, totally. It's sending shivers down my spine. I think what you're saying there is really incredibly powerful. It also links back to what Anna from Heard in London was saying in our last episode. She was, I suppose, talking in some ways more about inner conflict. So she was talking about self-esteem and self-love and acceptance of one's own bodies. What if we were the last generation to do that to ourselves? And what if we took the courage, even if not to do the work for ourselves, but to develop that self-love, that self-care, that self-esteem for those who come after us?
Absolutely. I listened to Anna's interview kind of over the weekend in preparation for this, and I was so inspired by her work and the things that she said, and I resonated on so many different levels with the things that she was talking about. And I completely agree with her, is that the self-love and self-esteem is really, really at the core of it. Because if you can't cultivate that for yourself, and if you've grown up in environments that have made that difficult, if you've had people telling you all of your life that you're worthless or you're ugly or you're not good enough, that just becomes embedded. It becomes embedded into your neurobiological structure. So the journey into self-love and self-acceptance is a long, hard journey, and it's a courageous journey, and it needs support. It needs amazing people like Anna, who is kind of holding the space for others to do that. I completely agree. That's at the foundation of why this individual focused approach is important to me, is that, no, I think it's a Marianne Williamson quote, isn't it, that probably everybody uses, that what right do you have not to be powerful, not to be amazing? It's like, we are, each one of us is an incredible, unique spark of the divine, and we need to support each other to allow that spark to shine as much as possible.
Beautiful. So with this whole driving force of helping to resolve conflict in the world, you could have gone into politics. But
that's what my mum says.
I can imagine. But you've chosen instead to work at ground level with grassroots organisations in education. We've not mentioned that you've worked in schools. I think maybe you briefly mentioned you've worked in schools as well, but also setting up your own school with Kate. You work in corporate settings. How do you juggle all of this?
Well, I always work in collaboration with others. I work in and amongst teams of people. So I never do anything on my own. I don't think it's possible to make this kind of change on your own. So I have incredible collaborators that I work with. I've mentioned several of those, whether it's Nadine or Tina or Kate, and many other people that I work with. We build these visions together. We enlist the support of others. We train other people who are interested in this work to do that for us. So, when I'm sitting in the middle of a project, then there's always others around me who are incredibly skilled, who are doing their part of the project. Often I might be taking a coordinating role or a strategic role or a training role, but it's always teamwork. It's always about a team approach. So I think that's how how you can get a lot done is that don't expect that you have to do everything yourself. And then I have my own system. I think when we were talking before, I mentioned it, is that I'm a bit of an obsessive planner. So I'm just constantly on top of my task list, but I allow it to be flexible. I allow it to move. I don't just talk about my work tasks within that. I'm always, I mix it. I think, we are rounded, holistic human beings. So within that, I'm thinking about my morning routine, about my meditation practice or my movement and yoga practice, my exercise, thinking about what I'm eating, thinking about how I sleep. I'm thinking about my social life and maintaining my connections with friends and family and loved ones, but making sure that I leave room for fun in my life too, because all of that makes me a more effective human being. So well-being, I know that for you and Hayley, well-being is hugely important. It's a big part of what this podcast is about. I think well-being is right at the center of everything that I do, because why send out more bad energy into the world? Let's send out more joy.
Oh, I love to finish on a joyful note. But actually, we're not quite finished yet, because there are 2 questions that we ask all of our guests. I'm going to ask you one, then Hayley's going to ask you the next one.
Right.
And the first one, again, beautiful segue into this. So do you have a top tip for our listeners?
A really, really simple one. It's kind of neurobiological or socio-biological. I don't know how I would describe it, but it catches us on all these different levels of being. And it's as simple as this, is find your feet. And I mean that in the physical aspect, as well as the other levels that means. So neurobiologically, when we are in stress, when we are dysregulated, we tend to lose our feet. We tend to lose our grounding. Actually, physically, we start to operate more from the belly, chest up. For the fight response, we might be kind of getting ready into our fight postures. We might be up on our toes, ready to run. We might be a bit frozen and disconnected from our bodies if we've gone into freeze or into faint. So a really quick and easy thing that you can do is to put your attention on your feet on the floor and really feel the connection of the soles of your feet against the ground. And you can do that by scrunching your toes. That's a really kind of nice way of doing it. But what that does is that it switches back on the parasympathetic nervous system, the kind of rest and digest part of the nervous system. Once you put your attention back on your feet, it starts to regulate your breathing. It starts to shift your heartbeat and your blood pressure. You begin to secrete different kinds of chemicals from in the endocrine system. There's a whole lot of things that start to shift when you put your attention on the lower half of the body. The feet can sometimes feel like a really long way away, so it's good to know that the feet begin in the lower back. You can start just by putting your hands on your kidneys, making a connection there, and then following the energy down so that you become rooted into the ground. And also, it doesn't have to be a really still, slow thing. It can be about movement. It can be going for a walk and really mindfully feeling the tread of your feet on the floor. But I think apart from the neurobiological benefits of that, when you find your feet, you become present because you're able to actually be here in this space, in this moment. And when you're here in this space, in this moment, you can respond to what's needed around you. You can be part of the environment. You can be in connection with the others around you. Actually switches which part of the brain you're operating from. So a very, very simple thing to find your feet on the floor has a massive, massive knock-on effect.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. I absolutely love that tip about your feet. But I would also love to know, we would love to know, what's your favourite or most profound or a profound food-related memory that you can share with us?
Oh, Hayley, so this was a really difficult question for me because I love food. I'm a big foodie, and a really big part of my travel experience is food. I eat anything and everything because I want to experience the culture through the tastes and the flavors. For this conversation, I want to talk about a really central activity that we do through the Human Hive, which is communal food preparation. We talk about skills sharing, and we have 3 different categories. So about eat, make, and play. Eat, make, and play seems to cover a lot of creative communal activities, whether it's through art or kind of crafts, or whether it's about construction, or whether it's playing a sport or playing a musical instrument. But the one I love the best, obviously, is the eat one, because it's about how we share food and how we share tips and tricks about how we create our food. So we started quite early on in our work having a team building activity, which is making a Syrian salad called fattoush, which many of your listeners might know, which you might know, which is a very, very common salad in Syria and kind of that area of the Middle East. It's got lettuce in it and radishes and tomatoes and cucumbers and mint and lemon juice and garlic and parsley and onion. So it's got lots of different flavors in it. And also generally what Syrians do is that they toast bread and they add bread into it as well. It's a lovely, lovely dish. Also, we use sumac, which is a very typical herb spice from the Middle East, which is kind of citrusy flavor. So we can use the preparation of fattoush, and we have done, as a way of people coming together and collaborating. So what's wonderful about fattoush is that everyone has a different way of making it. So there's no one way of chopping the tomatoes or chopping the cucumbers. It's that you have an opportunity to show me how your grandmother cuts tomatoes, or how you like to make up the dressing, to your flavor, to your taste. And it's a conversation with the group that's making the salad about how you do that. And one of my most profound memories of this fattoush activity, and we've done this literally all over the world now, was in Italy. We took our training to Italy in 2017 to a small town in southern Tuscany called Cetona, and we trained up a team of about 35 people, some of whom were local Italians, some were kind of visiting kind of staff from small NGOs from other parts of Europe, some had migrated in from West Africa. So we had a very, a mixed group of people. And on our second day of training, we were doing the fattoush activity. And so we had 5 tables of fattoush happening simultaneously, with people collaborating, all with the same ingredients. And each salad was completely different. And there were conversations, like we had one group that was all Italians. And, it was very important about how much olive oil was in there and what consistency that was. And there was another group that was quite mixed. And there was a big discussion around, do we add the bread or do we not add the bread? And like this, everything has to be chopped up in exactly the right way, otherwise it's not right. And you get to learn a lot about people from the way that they create and share food together. But it's an amazing activity for creating relationship between people, because the wonderful thing is that you make the salad and then you sit down together and you eat it. And everyone gets an opportunity to try everybody else's salad. We usually make a pot of hummus, so we have a pita bread, we have some yogurt and different things to go with it. And then we share the meal. And we call that, in our framework, we call that let it land. So we have that let it land moment where we enjoy the fruits of our labor, and we get to discuss and to rest and digest and to process what that experience was like for us and bring meaning to it, so that we can then decide what we'd like to do next. Fattoush is my profound food-related memory that I want to share with you. And I encourage everybody to try out their own version of fattoush.
Oh, thank you, Darren. I absolutely love fattoush salad. I was sitting here going, yes, when you came up with that. Brilliant.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's become one of my favourites too.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? How flavoursome it is with, just seemingly such simple ingredients.
Oh yes, and we did it. I had this memory when we did it once for East Sussex Music Hub. We were doing a training for them, and we brought a team of local Syrians with us. The Syrian musicians and Syrian community leaders from Brighton, and they came with us, and they just took over the fattoush making. It was like, no, this is how you do fattoush. Everybody step aside. We're doing it like this. And of course it was amazing and everybody loved it, but it's so interesting, and also different people from different parts of Syria saying, no, you don't do it like that, you do it like this. And I always say, no, you don't do it like, you do it like this. So yeah, there's no agreement on what is fattoush. It's very regional.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, there's lots of stuff like that happens in Italy, where there's like this seemingly traditional Italian dish, and it's like, no, it's regional, and every single region is going to claim to have the right way of making that dish.
Yeah, and I love that because it is, again, it's specificity. It's about place. It's about people and place. I think food does that. Food gives you that real specificity of people and place, and music. That's why I love food and music. That's why a lot of my work is food and music, because it is so specific and contextual.
Thank you so much, Darren. It's been just a joy to hear you, and we could chat together all day.
Yes,
thank
you.
So much. There's just so
amazing.
Much.
Yes, you truly are a guest who nourishes your community. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. I'm so excited by your podcast. I can't wait to hear the next interviews that you have and all the other amazing people that you've got in stores.
Thank you so much, Darren.
Thank you.
Have a lovely rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye.
So if you enjoyed that, please subscribe to our North and Chick podcast, and also follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter as North and Chick, all lowercase, no spaces.